somebody's got to do it. Live. Okay, so this is Senate Appropriations, Tuesday, March 26th, and we're continuing our testimony on the FY 25 budget request. And we have testimony from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and we have Gus Seeley, the Executive Director. And I see you have Polly Major here with you as well, to fill in any blanks that there might be. So welcome, Gus. You've got a lot of stuff here, probably, well, of course, you know we like photographs. But
Where's the one in line with?
Second page.
So obviously housing is a huge issue. We've been struggling with the level of homelessness, how we set up more shelters in the budget adjustment. Even a year ago, we put in $2.5 billion more to move forward. And we still have a long way to go. So your role is vital in how we move forward. So I'm gonna let you take it from here in terms of, you know, what you've done with the money that you've had, also, sort of how you see what are the strategies for where we need to go from here to where we need to be. And anything else you'd like to bring to our attention?
Okay, thank you very much. So for the record, that's the director for the board. And in addition to Polly Major, our CFO and Duffy is here. You all should have received a month and a half or so ago this annual report electronically. If anybody is old like me and wants a paper copy, I'm going to provide one, but we also try to reduce that. The presentation, I think, is about 17 or 18 presentation. And lots of time for any questions that you have, but I just need to start with my great thanks for both the responsibility and trust you placed in us over the course of the pandemic. And some of you, 2 of you going back 37 years when the program began in Senator Starr's committee when he was in the other body. So it's a long record of collaboration in this committee, and some of you probably can give the testimony just about as well as I could. And I appreciate all of that. Just to open the presentation, we recently completed a project in Burke, Vermont, which was a worn out Section 8 project where we added 8 apartments. The owner was ready to retire and move on. The place needed a lot of work.
I had screen shared, so the introductions to have first. Is that Anna? Am I able to screen share? Sorry.
Actually, this slide on funding since 2020 is really helpful because we've done things sort of over time, and it gives you what is it?
Yeah.
How does it add up? And
Yeah, and we'll get to that and some of the other stuff. The other picture, just on this very first slide, we've made a major investment in the in the rail trail in Royal County. The Walcott Community Forest is actually a companion project for the folks in Walcott that we're able to fund this year. It's an education lab for the kids in school. It's a place for people to recreate. And let's see. That's the slide, which always. So we're asked in our annual report to report on what we did in 23 and first half of 24. So I'm not going to read you all these numbers, but lots of leverage for the state's investment. Some of that is ARPA, but other federal sources and tax credits, and lots of big results, especially on the housing side. We have been giving the Joint Fiscal Committee a report that tells you month by month over the next 2 years when housing will come online, because it takes time to build. There have been all kinds of delays, from permit delays, but primarily supply chain interruptions and a smaller labor force that affects that. We were able to celebrate in Morrisville with Senator Westman last summer. That project was delayed by a fire that took place when the building was 90% complete. And we've had an ongoing conversation in your ag committee about helping young farmers onto farmland, the bread and butter farm. In Shelburne, as an example, where we just helped them acquire with a lot of help from the city of South Burlington, 2 new parcels in South Burlington. These numbers are about what's been done over the pandemic. We're gonna add, I think, another 300 to 400 homes with the remaining funds. Those funds should be all committed by the end of this fiscal year, unless some project has been delayed. The largest investment has been in multifamily rental housing, but we've also invested in shelter. We've created 190 new beds. We appreciate the work you did in the budget adjustment. We have 2 proposals for 2 more shelters, one in central Vermont and one in southeastern Vermont, that we hope will be fundable this year. We've begun a program for recovery residences. And Senator, you'll recall the day you took me to meet folks at Turning Point. We will open the first project in Bennington in a few months, and the second project would turn in by the end of the year. So
Great.
thank you for that introduction.
Thank you for following up on it and making it happen, because we felt left out down in Bennington with having no recovery residences anywhere.
That forgotten kingdom
I
again.
know, it's terrible until dust came.
Oh.
Just-
And then he rediscovered Bennington. I'm gonna keep going because obviously you've got a lot of more slides and
We have more slides.
so I have a question, really, to cut to the chase. Is the transfer not withstood again?
We are about on pace for the transfer tax when you add the transfer tax allocation, the capital bill, and some funding from the Clean Water Fund. We are actually at that mark. And so the punchline for you today, to get right to the point, is that the housing costs that we're dealing with today have so outpaced Vermonters' incomes, which is part of the point of this slide. You look at what the average wage for childcare workers, for social service occupations, for school teachers.
Maybe
police
childcare is
officers.
gonna change after we pass that bill.
It
One would
may,
hope.
right.
Yeah.
But if childcare workers get up to where social service occupations are, if they got 50% bump, what it costs to build housing today is still so much more expensive than what you can afford on that kind of income. And I'll show you a slide in a moment that just talked about what the cost drivers have been in housing. I do want to just note that your old friend Steve Klein called me last summer. He was working with a group of volunteers supporting Afghan refugees in Montpelier, and they were having trouble keeping people in town. So we partnered him with Downstreet and provided a line of credit so that they could actually compete in the real estate market. So this building on Pearl Street will be the first one that they'll own. They raised a couple $100,000 locally towards purchase to help house a refugee family. They hope to do that 3 or 4 more times. And we also hope, as we've done many times across the state, that this will be the year that the Bennington High School is revitalized as a mixed use project, including housing, including
That's quite an
childcare.
impressive building
Yeah.
centers here. Bennington High School.
Impressive, but been
It
vacant.
is, and it just got approved, well, just got approved in the budget. It's down, but
The town's contributing 2 million in ARPA funds toward the project. That's how important they thought it was.
Good use of the funding.
As
and it also butts Pleasant Street, which is where a lot of drug activity is taking place. I'm hopeful that this will rehabilitate that neighborhood.
this building's been vacant for about a quarter century.
How long?
Seemed like forever, 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
So those numbers you've got up there right now, are those combined together to?
so
No.
as you all know, the governor has said what we need to do the most for housing is permanent. And I have testified a couple times. I'll be in the colleagues committee across the hall tomorrow. And there's lots of good things in the bill that Senate Economic Development has posed. I've been a strong proponent of shortening the appeals times, of encouraging density. But I give you this slide and these numbers to show you that of $25 million of hard construction costs for 60 to 8 unit development in Shelburne. Permitting is $620,000, and Act 250 is only $103,000. Now, that's real money. It's a couple of often $2,000 per apartment because they charge you based on what it costs to build. But my point is to say to you, while
It's not your cost driver.
it will, what reforms will do, especially using the designation programs, is give developers reason to believe they can get through the process faster because time is money when you're a developer, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit. So it's gonna help on the margins, but in terms of actually taking the cost and bringing it down to the level that a $45,000 a year social service worker or a $60,000 a year elementary school teacher can afford, it's not gonna do that. It's gonna, and we have such a cost problem that really, for many, many occupations, it's gonna take some level of public investment beyond what the transfer tax is currently yielding to really bring the costs down. DHFA produced this slide, but this tells you over 2017 to 20 what various construction costs were up at. And what you can see since the pandemic is that the rate of increase is at least 3 times what it was in the prior 3 years. You couple that with the fact that construction interest on construction loans gone from 3 to 9%, that mortgage rates have doubled.
What is
That
the mortgage rate right now?
it's around 7.
7
So little under, just under.
for fixed rate? 30?
All of that has made housing less affordable to most Vermonters.
I could have my estate. Hey,
Mhm.
the end of 30 years. Don't think I'm mine. Okay. Well, it raises the fundamental question as a country. The alignment or the lack of alignment between housing affordability and incomes. And what is happening throughout the country in terms of people who are in occupations that have been historically viewed as ones that you could support yourself in a family, are not, and is there some correction in sight? I don't know what the thinking is in terms of the housing community, but this juncture between costs and supply and what people have for incomes is not unique to Vermont. And the question for us is how much the little state of Vermont can contribute toward this. I mean, 640,000 people. And yet we're paying a lot because, you know, we've got a budget that's coming over, and I guess there'll be quite a bit, millions more for, unless we can get some kind of housing alternative. So we're in a kind of a crappy situation, to be honest. So I don't know whether there's some correction in terms of thinking about, but as long as materials and those base costs continue, then the affordability is obviously driven by that cost of construction.
You're exactly right, and it is a national problem in scope. At the beginning of the pandemic, I called a bunch of my colleagues across northern New England, and they all said we have supply problems. People are showing up in droves, they're bidding up the price of real estate. So it is a national problem, and I don't, we have to hope after the next election, maybe there'll be a Congress that will want to participate in a solution, but right now, I think we are on our own as to solutions. So this slide was to show you what had happened over the last 5 years, and actually, when you go you'd have to go back to 2017 to have a year where we would have less funds for housing than we'll have this year, and that's because in 2017, you and the governor agreed upon a housing revenue bond that then gave us revenue for the next 3 or 4 years. Massachusetts, their governor is doing a massive housing bond now, in light of problems that they face. But the cost pressures we see, shortages we're seeing all throughout New England and across the country. And I know you have to balance all the needs of the state. I'm here to say our budget for housing next year is gonna be compared to the average of the last 4 years. About 15% of what's been available, so,
Well,
Numbers-
that's been so distorted with all the federal money.
yeah, and I'm just saying to you that, if you averaged it out at 100 million. And we now get down to $15 million. We're gonna have less capacity with a much more expensive real estate market to work in. So that's my primary message. I know you'll do the best you can on that, but that's the situation.
Can I ask a question? Do you know what the federal government has done to, real estate sales, the commission? Haven't they reduced the commission level from 6%, or how is that? Do you know anything about that?
Oh, it's the time of sale to the broker?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's gonna be an adjustment there, and again. All the help will be around the margins, so
Yeah.
if we reduce permitting costs by 1 or 2%, great. If we reduce fees brokers take by 1 or 2%, great, but our cost basis, Senator Starr told me about a home that was going up your way for $500,000. That's
In
not.
North Troy, who would have thunk?
Yeah.
Well, somebody.
Yeah, but it isn't
North
worth that.
New Jersey.
You know where Troy is?
Yeah, I do, because I make North Troy relish, remember?
Oh, yeah, I've been there once.
we just
I don't
added
believe that.
Yeah, I went
Yeah,
through your
that's the-
customs at North
that
Troy.
for margin.
They never called me.
So-
Because you told me to go through there and you weren't going back at the time.
All
We
right,
might get the interest rates down.
one of the things I
That would
noticed
help.
in the House budget is 3.5 million to go to, public safety. With public safety, to elevate housing.
That's public safety, elevating housing.
Well,
I think that's part of the flood recovery.
mhm,
I thought you meant because then the criminals wouldn't be able to know where to work.
oh,
Maybe it's for troopers like that.
on the other hand, that is quite prescriptive, because I'm sure that there are other mitigation and other areas of help. So that's very prescriptive, to say specifically for that one purpose, but I know they've done a lot of advocacy for, flood, impacted towns. So we'll just keep going on that, but, yes.
I do want to say that there is a huge amount of goodwill and communities like Brattleboro who are offering buildings, municipal buildings for at low or no cost. Energy Systems has made land available in Heinsberg for housing. So a wide swath of communities are now recognizing that there's an opportunity, and there's a huge pipeline of opportunity. And the numbers here are probably 150 to 200 things short, because we will not fund everything that is in front of us this year. We will not have enough resources, so. One of the things we were intended to do was preserve affordable housing, and I just need to say to you, I think you need to think about this as one of the strategies that reduces homelessness. The building on the left is the old hospital in St. Johnsbury. And the owner went to Rural Edge and said, no, I'm ready to sell it. I'll sell it at market rate. The rents are gonna go up $600 a month, and the elderly tenants will all be displaced, so we help them acquire that property. The same thing in South Burlington with Dorset Commons, where there are a number of new Americans, and rents are in the $1,300 range, easily would have been pumped up to $2,000 a month with an out-of-state investor. Good news, and I hate this chart, it's hard to look at, but over the course of the pandemic, more than 4,000 households that were unhoused were rehoused. The trouble is that more families fell into a state of homelessness. One of the things we did was to ask the network of nonprofits that we work with all over the state to help support people moving out of homelessness. And so as there was turnover over these last 3.5 years, 1,000 apartments were made available and have been occupied by folks who are unhoused. But for the Affordable Housing Network, that also means that they went from 12% of their portfolios being occupied by people who are really struggling to 25%. And we are seeing the strains of that in property management, in maintenance, all of those things that you hear about, I'm sure, all the time from anybody who is trying to house a high needs population. We are doing lots of service supported housing. We have done hotels to housing. This is the old ho-hum on the Williston Road. We helped CHD purchase it at the beginning of the pandemic as an isolation facility long before vaccines for people with COVID. There are actually state employees who stayed there while they got better. It then became an emergency shelter, and we've now converted it to 20 apartments of what are called permanent supportive housing, meaning it's for people who had been unhoused and they have a set of needs, and there's staffing on site to help them address it. We're doing lots of other service supportive housing as well across the state, and we're doing shelters. This shelter opened this winter, I think just about a month ago in St. Johnsbury. The new shelter will open in Hyde Park in April, delayed by a permitting dispute, but we're on its way to opening. And as I said, we've got 2 proposals in front of us that would add another 85 beds.
Yeah.
Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was very shocked this weekend reading news from the state of Vermont. Yeah, we have 4 shelters that the health department just set up $50,000 a night to run those 4 shelters. We must have all seen that. So when you set up a shelter, does it cost something like that per night to run it?
I don't think so. I don't think AHS is funding shelters at that kind of level. And I would say that you might want to talk with the Office of Economic Opportunity about what they pay shelter operators. But I know with a program we've done with the Champlain Housing Trust, where they're actually operating a hotel for the GA program, I think the cost with services for the people who live there is about $95 a night.
I think it's hard to compare because they opened them up because of the concern about people that were going to have the benefits terminated. And so, because of adverse weather, and there was no take up. That was the other factor in terms of, I think the cost as well. So
But no hiccup.
no,
Well, it's been rising in Burlington.
in Burlington maybe, but in some areas, they said they closed them because no one was
Yeah.
coming to utilize the service. Which sometimes when people, maybe we know people couch surf, sometimes they'll, have family or friends and that's what they'll opt to do, but if you have no other alternative, then, but sometimes people have some alternatives that, at least for a time limited period of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Cherry Street, the state office building you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the last report I thought was up around just shy of 40.
Yeah, 43.
Yeah,
So
Just
just to
still, I mean,
a lot of money.
well, every day, 50,000 a night. That's what it costs, 200 grand.
I think it was per person though.
I don't think it's per person.
It's
Almost, but
just for the, yeah.
Mhm. But if you were to put 50 people in, if that were the take up, then the cost would be quite different, but in some ways, I mean, at least the administration stepped forward and provided a housing alternative. Because if that hadn't happened, obviously there would have been great concern about what happened, or are you putting people in jeopardy? So it's not without its controversy, certainly, and it's not a long term, but the question still becomes one of how do you take those existing structures, like whether it's a school or whatever, and the extent to which we can move those units online more quickly and in a way that makes sense in a longer term perspective, but it's it's an ongoing challenge and I don't know exactly how the budget's gonna come out. And of course, there's a big bill in the House that, I think that, Champlain Housing, I guess, might have been the genesis for that. But,
Leadership over there asked them for big proposals. So
yeah, well, they got one.
3 points here. There's a story in Vermont Digger today, the building that is proposed for Waterbury will be have 3 units for people with intellectual disabilities, support them up and down service. There's not a building for it. You guys created a pilot project for that group of people, and we are working with them. Soteria House is a project at Pathways Vermont. This is gonna be a new facility that will double their capacity to serve young people with schizophrenia. So we're very happy about that. In the other body, they asked us, what could we do over the next 3 or 4 years to reduce the pressures on the GA program? We think that in addition to building more housing, we need to build more permanent supportive housing with services for some people. In the short term, we'll need more shelters, but we want to build facilities like the one on the Williston Road where they can be converted to housing, because ultimately shelter is not a good place to be. And then Paul Dragon has said to me that there are really people in the shelters that need a different level of service, and I think this is a subject for your committee, Chair Lyons, which is, and I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, we've had people who need help managing their medication. We have adult elderly people who need their adult diapers changed. We have people with schizophrenia that our shelter workers are not trained to. So that's a longer discussion on a different day, but I.
Well, it also calls into the other programs and resources that are being funded to serve this population and how well they are helping with this or seeing housing as part of their responsibility. So Senator Lyons, I'm gonna have to keep moving.
Yeah, I want to keep moving, but, and we'll have you in probably at some point, but the question is, obviously, there's a need out there, and we've talked about this before in our committee with, and I think with you. What the needs are for whether it's intellectual disabilities or mental health at different levels, and what is the connection between your office, your organization, and the numbers out there, and then you hit the nail on the head. Workforce is just whether we have the workforce or not. So somehow it all has to fit together.
Yes, and we will not solve it. Everybody that had a witness talking about workforce, and they said,
No,
the number one issue for workforce is the availability of housing.
exactly.
So to move toward our housing and conservation mission. On the left is what Big North Ferry looked like after the flooding in July. Some of you might have heard a report on Marketplace, but the picture on the right is in Northfield on the aptly named Water Street. And after Irene, 7 homeowners took part in the buyout program, and this park was created. And the reason it was featured this summer on Marketplace is because the July floods came, the park flooded. There was a little bit of debris, and 3 days later, the park was open and the community was able to use it again. So there are some places that we have built that we're probably gonna have to unbuild in order to have safer communities. After Irene, we used our conservation dollars to help with the buyout program. We're ready to do that again. And we've been in touch with the appropriate offices to say, let us know how we can be helpful. But this is part of our conservation work. We talked again, 2 points on this slide. One is that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to give us an extra $13 million over 2 years. We probably have 3 or 4 to spend it. To be matched to buy development rights from farmers. We usually spend $3 million a year or get 3 million from the feds and match it with 3 million in state funds. Some years it's been as high as 4. So I know this is a really bad time to say we need more dollars to match federal dollars, but that's what I'm here to have to tell you. Picture is of a farmer in Waitsfield, Dave the priest. He was a high school hockey and baseball star at Harvard Union. He went off to study economics and then decided working in hedge funds or on Wall Street was not for him. And he's now managing about 1,000 acres, up and down, Route 100.
Doesn't look like he's doing too good growing corn.
Well, there was some flooding this summer. But he participated in what was called the first biotech cell project in the country, something similarly invented for us. It closed in December, and if you meet him, you'll find he's quite a go-getter. Really talented guy. So we want to help young people continue to be able to have access to land and be the next generation that moves ag forward. He's one of those folks. And again, there is a great opportunity to bring in more federal dollars to the state. Conservation can sometimes have a big social mission. Some of you know that the Boy Scout camp, Camp Sunrise went up for sale a little over a year ago. The state passed on buying it. We worked on a deal with the Vermont Land Trust and Outright Vermont, and they're gonna close and open on the property and open that camp in the next year, close May 1st. And it will be a safe place for youth that otherwise don't have safe places to be. So really serving an important purpose. This is a list of all of our conservation programs. I'm not gonna talk about them extensively, but I do want to make one mention of the AmeriCorps program because Dana Kaplan, the very articulate development director of Outright Vermont, I called him to tell him about the award by the board. And I said, why don't we have our AmeriCorps Service Day to help you get Camp Sunrise ready? He said, oh, I meant to say this to your board today. My first job when I left college was as an AmeriCorps volunteer at the Committee on Temporary Shelter. That's how my career started. So AmeriCorps is a program we invest in that I think is really about the next generation. You're well familiar with the Farm and Forest Viability Program. It gets great results.
How does that interact with the land development, working on this fund ag?
Some people should have thought that instead of creating a new program, we should have just built with the one that was
Integrated.
Well, that's my question.
Well, what we do primarily is technical assistance and business planning. WeLab is primarily providing grants that for people who implement, who have good ideas. What I would say to you is you would find, and I think the folks that WeLab would say this, is that the people who go through this business planning program have a really high rate of success in accessing those grants and other grants. And the next slide is actually about our Rural Economic Development Initiative, which provides grant writing support for small businesses in small towns. So we just help.
I said some of your way.
Which one was it?
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. So Buffalo
I
Mountain,
told them to use my names
good,
many times.
good. Buffalo Mountain Co-op, we helped them win a large grant, and these folks at Maplebrook Farm, which actually is a processor for feta and mozzarella, it's worth anything $1.5 million grant. So the program is doing exactly what Senator Starr intended when he asked us to take on this idea.
And Brady, and that's been a good deal.
Yeah,
Well, I remember at that point, Ted Brady was working for Senator Leahy, and he said, I guess to your committee, that there's a lot of federal funding available if you would just apply for it. So I guess,
I didn't know, Brady.
yeah. So I'm gonna keep going
Yeah,
because
we're just about at the end of the slide. So you've asked us to take on a lot of new initiatives over the last 4 years. We are sometimes securing additional funding for clean water as a clean water service provider. We've gotten a grant from Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. We secured a grant to help with the planning for the 50 by 50 planning that you passed at Act 59 last year. We will not have the kind of budget that would keep a farm worker housing program in place next year. There's nothing in the House budget at this point. There is something in their housing bill to support the continuation of land access opportunity.
Yeah, but that's the best housing deal we have going.
It's a really important one, but if my budget is down 85%, I don't know how we can maintain it at the level we've maintained.
For dollar per dollar, you're getting some real housing done there compared to, I mean, what, 30,000 for a whole project.
And I'm not saying we'll eliminate it, I'm saying we can't maintain it at its current level. It's just really,
Gotta have that dollar to.
Yeah.
If you-
there's a lot of good things we should be doing in housing that goes to farm worker housing, that goes to shelter capacity, that goes to the workforce, that goes to home ownership. That we're just not gonna have the budget to do. This is our sources and uses budget. It shows you how we use the property transfer tax sometimes to be supporting things like the Farm and Forest Viability Program, which we provide $2 million a year to out of our base. Sometimes to help with the cost of federal programs, including AmeriCorps. That's our overall budget. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but I just to go to the first question you asked me, Madam Chair, about, what can we do with less resources? How can we stretch the dollars? We will look for every opportunity we can to do that. But there's no doubt that with this much less dollars, there's just gonna be less production overall. We're gonna continue to explore every federal source and compete for them. But we don't have it in our power to make the cost of building housing less costly than it is. We're just a captive of the real estate market and the construction market as it is today. So, we've experimented with tiny homes. There's something called a wheel pad, which is a way to add a room and a bathroom. We're gonna add 2 units again for people with intellectual disabilities in Walcott. Actually, but there's a limit to what, if you want us to take on the kind of fundamental projects here in Montpelier and St. Johnsbury, downtown Morrisville, that really help change a community. It's just not an inexpensive undertaking.
No, I appreciate them. Yes, one last question.
The late Megamega bundle.
Yeah.
Did you guys, BHCB donate to that,
We have,
purchase of that?
we have offered to help them with an application. Fellow who is managing that wants to raise the money privately. He would rather not get help from the state.
State? You know where that is, on Shattuck Hill, you know where Walmart is?
Yeah,
You turn to go into Walmart, but you keep on going. You come to the Shattuck Hill Road and you turn left and it takes you down and the road is almost where that blue line is. And it shows the whole lake up through there.
that's a valuable property. You do.
Well,
Yeah, 750 is what they want for it.
750,000.
And if they can raise it without public's help,
Then the public health, then
then
all
God
the
bless.
other places stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've told them we'd be interested if they have a shortfall. The gorgeous piece of land and they want to use it for the community. So it's our local conservation work.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, thank you, Gus. I realize we'll have more conversations as we go along. But we have the folks from BGS and they've been in the shelter business lately, so it's kind of a nice segue, I guess. For them.
I don't think so.
I guess in some ways, the larger question is, a lot of these specialized, populations and the support that they need make us have to reassess how we are devoting our staff and our resources and our programmatic response, to support people in their housing, because case management should be, housing and preservation of housing should be part of that responsibility. But somehow case management is devolved to, I manage the services that my program funds as opposed to looking at the overall, situation of a particular household. So
Yeah.
we need to have more conversation on that.
Yeah, we're actually working with the foundation right now to provide some staffing within the housing organization, because having the services be
Yeah,
place-based in the
absolutely.
same way that the Dash program is proving so successful, I think is key to this. Services are available to the whole community, not just to a person with a specific diagnosis.
Absolutely, but that means kind of changing how people do their jobs and how they define their jobs, so we'll have more discussion on that. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate your coming in.
Thank
We'll
you
move on.
again for the enormous opportunity we've had to invest in, it's gonna end up being more than 4,000 homes around the state.
Well, we said we knew it was a huge bulge and it was good, but we use it long term, but it just was not gonna be on ongoing capacity, so. We know that it can't continue at this pace, and the little state of Vermont doesn't have the capacity to continue without those federal dollars.
No, I hope we can find a way to a pace that may not be at prior level, but will be above the transfer. So we're gonna need it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Now we're gonna move on to BGS. We're obviously behind quite a bit.
I can catch you up. I mean, you could ask me one question and I could be done.
Well, how much money do you want? And we know you get it from everybody else, so you don't need to worry.
Right.
Hey, Madam Chair, you got it. That's really for me.
Well, I've only been doing this for 20 years, so.
So you know us very well.
Yeah.
So I will be quick and we can go as quick as you'd like to go. So for the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. I've worked for the state of Vermont almost 20 years. Most of that time at V-Trans and then since 2017 at VGS. And with me today, I have Kate Everly. Kate, can you say hello?
Hi, Kate Everly, I'm the Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs for BGS.
Also Jason.
Yeah, I'm Jason Beanard. Everybody knows me.
Okay, you've already said hello today. And then Holly may have said hello today as well.
Hello, Holly Farad, Chief Financial Officer of Agency of Administration.
So they're the brains behind our budget. So thank you very much, Holly, and thank you very much, Jason. We have some other folks not here today that help us put our budget together as well. So the first thing I'll point out, this was a change we made a few years ago. I kind of always flash this when I'm in the room. But we used to have a giant budget book, which was 100 pages
And
about what
nobody read it.
BGS did. Nobody read it. So now we got a one pager. Both sides, this is BGS, right here. So as you know, we provide internal government services. I won't go through them all, but certainly things like procurement is one example. Fleet is another. It should be in your budget book. I don't know what page.
Budget book.
I didn't hear what the question was.
Do you know what page is
Did you
on
get
the
it?
budget book? I can print it real quick.
And you just put it up on the screen or not?
I don't.
I can do that.
All right, Hannah will do that.
But
Don't save on paper.
it's some performance measures that we look at our programs every single year, but it's a great way to report out on the work that we do and the impact we have on state government. So purchasing, contracting is in here.
But where you really see it in the budget's a fee for space and bill back to the various,
That's page 4 and 5.
You are correct, Madam Chair. So we are a mix of internal service funds as well as general fund and a little bit of transportation as well. The majority of our funds are internal service funds. So if you look at the top, as you know, we have the Energy Office, which was created in 2012/13. And the role of that office is to make our buildings more energy efficient. They do an amazing job. And as you all know, we expanded that program thanks to the legislature and the administration 2 years ago. And now we're doing the same for municipalities. So if you'd like to know more about that, happy to come back in and talk about it. Planning and Property Management is our group that does just that. They manage all of our state-owned and leased portfolio of buildings. They're the brains of our operation, I like to say, when it comes to buildings. Then we have operations and maintenance, so you see them here every single day, right? They're the wonderful custodians that we have, as well as the maintenance mechanics that you see. Very dedicated staff, they care very much about the buildings they're assigned to, and it really shows.
They do very well.
They're fantastic, aren't they? They're fantastic.
Senator Starr, do you mind removing that?
I could do it to
Bottom.
help with all.
I don't like to want.
Put in that cycling.
I didn't know, maybe you wanted to. Nickel.
I'm sure you all know David Sheets. I don't even think I need to give him an introduction. But he is the state curator, also works for BGS. Design and construction are the folks that do all of our planning, design and construction for state-owned buildings. They are extremely busy and an all-time high right now because not only are we maintaining the 240 buildings that we own, But as you know, we're also looking at some considerable renovations and new builds, especially for the Agency of Human Services. So they're gonna keep us very busy for a very long time. Safety and security is all of our safety infrastructure in state buildings, both leased and owned, things like cameras, badge access, panic buttons, security windows, you name it, if it's a security feature, they are in charge of it. If we go to the next slide or page. So I talked about purchasing contracting. What's really great to know about this program is we do all centralized supply procurement for the state of Vermont, and that political subdivisions can actually buy off of our contracts. So if you're not aware of that, that's a really nice service that we provide to municipalities.
The league probably, that's all the municipalities know of that.
We are constantly trying to market our services. Certainly Ted Brady, others come around and ask us all the time, but that you can't, political subdivisions cannot buy off of any other contracts other than the ones that we have at BGS, and that's due to statute and what's written in statute. Information centers, so as you know, we travel along the interstate, we have lovely information centers, we welcome both Vermonters, we have Vermonters.
Traffic, trash and toilets.
Well, but they do a lot to support economic development, Madam Chair, because we do a lot of wayfinding. We have display cases where we display local made goods in the state of Vermont. As well as just promoting economic development in general. So they do a fantastic job. We have people that come to Vermont every year and like come back to the information center to see our people because they're so amazing. Fleet, so just like a rental car, we provide lease vehicles to state agencies as well as a motor pool program. So you can drive from one place to another in the state for the day using one of our vehicles. Postal and print are kind of a pair like peanut butter and jelly. But they are in Middlesex and they do just what we're talking about. So much of what you have around here, our print postal folks do for you. Every night we get a big order, we print it and we deliver it by 6:30 in the morning. And then state surplus, another really great thing for municipalities to know. So as state agencies say, you know what, I no longer need this table or this chair, it goes to surplus, we sell it at a discount.
We gave Steve Klein a gift certificate.
Did you?
Yes. Don't you remember?
I hope he went.
Surplus, he loved.
You can get a
That's
really
great.
good discount and
Yes,
then
you can.
And then we take a
If
very
I
small
remember
portion just to recover
correctly.
personnel costs and then, and our expenses, and then the rest of it goes back to the state agency or department. So everybody gets a deal in that situation. So that's BGS in a really quick nutshell. We do have, what makes us also unique is that we have 10 program budgets. And so that's a lot to manage on a daily basis, which is why we're grateful for folks like Jason and Holly. Because they make sure that they're always reconciling our program throughout the year, and we meet with them either monthly or quarterly to go through each of those programs and make sure that we're reconciling properly and identifying items that maybe shouldn't be billed to that program. And as a result of doing that, we've actually found a lot of things that are being billed to the Fee for Space program, for example, that shouldn't be. It's a nice big code, everybody knows what's out there, and sometimes things get accidentally coded to Fee for Space. So that's one we always have our eyes on. So we have 10 program budgets, we have 337 permanent employees, and then we have another, I would say, 20 part-time employees that kind of ebb and flow throughout the year. So we bring on more grounds people, for example, in the summertime to maintain the grounds around the state. That's just an example of a part-time job that we have. We also
do
started,
some contracting, I would assume.
we bring in contracted services as well.
Right.
It just depends, where we are and what we have for personnel at the time. And if we can hire part-time employees, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. All programs are underneath the 3% target that was provided to us by Finance and Management in the fall, with the exception of Fee for Space. It's a very big program, lots of things, there's lots of volatility in the market right now. Energy costs are rising, repairs in our buildings are increasing because they're getting older, so you continue to see that Fee for Space number go up over time. We do sit down and we do things like we eliminate window washing. We try to eliminate things out of the budget to meet that bottom line that we can without actually doing any damage or harm to our buildings. We do get polite complaints sometimes, so we didn't wash windows in the complex for a couple of years, and I had a lot of phone calls from a lot of people around why aren't my windshields or windows being washed. So, but that is a long way of saying we do try to come up with creative ways to cut down and save in that program if we can. Engineering is up as well as purchasing. So the biggest up we have percentage overall this year is the purchasing program. That is because of VT buys. So VT buys, we're going from a manual procurement system to an automated system. We are almost done with implementation, but there's going to be annual operations and maintenance fees. And that's $595,000 a year. In addition to that, we need 2 dedicated full-time staff. Those staff will be directly supporting the VT Buys program, but primarily what they're gonna be doing is they're gonna be onboarding vendors into the system. And that is an ongoing life process because we need to orient people to purchasing and contracting in the state of Vermont. It's kind of like dating a little bit. We need to walk them through all the certifications they need, and then we need to get them into the system. So we haven't had anyone dedicated. The only person that's been doing this is Debbie Demore, who's the director. She wears many different hats, but she won't have the capacity once we get this up and running, and we're really trying to get everybody into the system.
An automated system that
Yeah.
has been done manually by one person and we could need 2 more.
So we're going
And,
from, we're going,
O&M costs of 500 and something, 95,000 a year.
so we're going from, everything is manual right now, which means to do contracting in the state of Vermont, it takes a really long time. I'm sure you've heard complaints, right?
Mhm.
How long does it take us to put out a bid? How long does it take us to execute a contract? How long does it take us to communicate that you either did or didn't get the contract? So it's all paper-based right now, and it just takes a lot of time. So what will happen is everything will happen inside the system. It will be communicating out to vendors, however often vendors want to be communicated to. It will direct RFPs, so request for proposals. You sign up for what you want, they will send it to you automatically. You don't have to go search for it. You could actually register with the state of Vermont and not even be a vendor for us yet, but again, it just gets you into the system that much faster if you want to bid on something for the state of Vermont. And then this is going to be electronic. This is different skill sets than it is when you talk about doing things manually. So yes, Madam Chair, your point is well made.
No, I'm just summarizing what you just said.
Your point is well made, and you are summarizing, so I appreciate that. We hope, the administration hopes, that over time, we will actually need less people in procurement across the state of Vermont.
Well, let me ask, does the budget included a creation of 2 positions?
We have these 2 positions internally already, and we are taking them from one area, we're putting them in the other, so
you're
you're
not
seeing.
asking to have positions
No.
created.
You see a reduction in prop man, and those 2 positions are moving over to office nursing contracting. So we have the positions. And it is something where it kind of levels itself out, but I'm not in one giant program, right? I'm in multiple programs. So you'll see it over here and then you'll see it up here, just the way that it works inside PGS because we're so siloed in our budgets. But that I just wanted to say is the biggest impact, but I also think will bring the best value to the state of Vermont in terms of procurement. Our goal is to make it friendly, to make it quick. And we want people to want to work for the state of Vermont. So that's the hope. There's a couple of other things that are significant ups in the program. That includes insurance for buildings. Nothing I have control over. We have a new insurer of buildings and their price is just more expensive than the prior provider. You can understand why that's happening in the market right now because they're seeing catastrophic events across the United States. And so if you're insuring buildings, it's a higher risk today than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
In a
Do
floodplain
you
like
bid
Montgomery.
that? Do you bid that out?
We do through risk management. So it's a program run by risk management. Rebecca, I can't remember, White runs that program. But because we're the ones that have the buildings, we're the ones that get billed for it. So anybody that has buildings, so we're not the only ones. BGS is one of 4 groups that have buildings, but we get billed for that insurance.
Is that an in-state company or?
I'm not able to answer that question because I don't know.
It would,
I'd be surprised.
I would be, because the amount of coverage you have to have, it's gonna be significant. Maybe Lloyd's of London.
And we used to have Lloyd's of London actually,
You
and we
wanna
were
get
still
away
insured.
from them.
Well, Waterbury was not an in-state company.
No, I don't think so.
We used to have, before whoever the new vendor is, and I would defer to Rebecca, we had CNA and we did have Lloyd's of London, and they extended the
Yeah.
policy for a month because we didn't have a new provider on yet, and then we had the July flooding event.
Or if you had to go to them, you're in bad.
So
Well, we still
CNA
have
and
that
Lloyd's of
coverage.
London is the one that is covering the flood.
I wonder who's,
That was
the
fun.
carrier for the freighter, the tanker that took the bridge out.
Oh, I know.
Oh, my God.
I can't imagine what that's gonna be
That
like.
was terrible.
Oh,
I haven't heard the results of that.
but the whole bridge is in the
Is this
river.
gone?
Yeah, it's just gone. And people just crumpled. I can't,
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Mile and a
They
half
didn't have,
bridge.
but there were cars at the bottom of the river.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Could
And they had a work crew on the bridge working at night, which construction oftentimes happens. so-
Especially in transportation.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'll be,
So I need to get back here.
Yes. So that's my
other
very,
questions.
very high level, quick budget presentation.
so the live auction, is that the sale they do over on 302?
The live auction is coming up. It's very exciting. I don't know the exact date.
Or maybe it's
in May.
on
I don't think they're gonna do it.
Get the online
It's
auction.
on Love too, isn't it? They're
Central
gonna
Garage is closed at that location, so I don't know if they're gonna still do it.
They're gonna do it
I
there.
don't know what we're doing. I can send an email. Send it out.
Why do you
Kind of
shopping at
flooded.
Center Star? You shopping?
For a new
There's some really
snowplow.
great deals.
I'm always looking for a good
There's
deal.
Oh, good.
Kayaks, there's vehicles,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, you name it, if the state owns it.
But
We,
when it goes to surplus and when it goes to auction, is it like size or dollar amount?
yeah, so things that are fairly mundane, just continue to go through the regular surplus program, but things we think people are gonna want to buy in auction, go to the auction. Sharks is actually one of the things people love the most about the surplus
The little-
program.
Swiss Army knives.
Everybody loves those.
The sharks. But you get it from the airport? You don't.
We do get them
Oh,
at
you
the
do get
airport. Yeah, that's exactly where we get them from.
I thought they had their own.
So, but I did wanna say, I appreciate you saying that you like the online surplus, because
Yeah.
just like the office person contracting where we are modernizing there. We just modernized surplus a few years ago, and that's why you're seeing that all online.
It's great.
And then, and it's hopefully friendlier, easier, you can see it. And then we're also bringing in a workplace integrated management system, and that's gonna help us with all of our building. Just maintaining, planning, design, construction, operations, it's all tied into the same system. So when you pull up an asset, which is a building, you get to see everything about that building.
Well, we're about to give you another, assignment. And that is, a replace, to create a forensic facility. We could not do it at the, psychiatric hospital, ran into a federal, prohibition, so to speak. So, we need to move forward. We've talked about it. We've got, so I've been in conversation with Senator Ingles or stuff like that. Well,
And Amy Pope did a great job. We went back and forth with some language that we were submitting, because I ran into you. And I worked with Madam Chair, Alice Emmons in the House to put in some language around forensics. So we'll be working very closely with Dale and DMH. And we'll start that process of understanding what
did they
they,
put any money in the capital bill?
we'll be using our planning line item to support the planning piece of it. So we didn't get any additional money, but we have a line item we can drop.
So you
It's for planning.
You don't need anything then this year?
We don't need anything this year for planning. Once we get to design and construction, again, it depends what the solution is, but it's likely that we will need funding when we get there.
Okay,
One provincial question,
yes.
the farmer's market, is there?
Farmers market's coming back,
It
baby.
is, okay, I figured it.
I just want to say, it got really escalated really quickly. A lot of misinformation floated around, and that's unfortunate. So just so everybody knows, thumbnail real quick. We have to continue to do work in 133 because we have a lot of equipment that was damaged in the July flooding event that's in the basement and sub basements. And that thing that was kind of like a little jailhouse outside of our building, it's actually historic. It's the ice house. 120 or 120, no, 133, too many buildings, I'm moving too quickly. Was built and it was the most modern building of its time, and they actually had air conditioning. And so they would drop in ice chunks and then they had vents, and the vents would bring in the air conditioning inside the building. So cool. We don't use it for that anymore, but it's our way of getting equipment in and out of the basement and sub basement. So over the summer, they'll be breaking equipment down. We'll have a crane, we'll be craning things out. So it wasn't that they couldn't use 133, it was, we're going to be taking more space in
Part of it,
133 than
right,
we
so I thought
normally
that like
do.
whole part along the building, they don't really use anyways.
But we worked with the contractor and we've minimized what we're gonna need on the lower lot. And so we're working, I believe, very collaboratively with
Great.
farmers market. I think they're as happy as I can get them.
Okay,
They're,
that's good to hear.
they're good.
We're trying.
Okay,
We're working really
Our
hard.
people, your deputy, I think,
yeah,
was in ag a couple of them.
and I heard people that met with him.
So it used to be, sort of.
They did, been here the last couple of years, but they all love this site the best. I mean, it's one of the nicest parking lots that we have too, because it's got trees and rain garden.
But it's easy to move up to the upper one,
All right, I'm glad to, no,
So hopefully, can I get you back on schedule?
Yes.
I'm only 4 over.
Yeah,
you are. And then our next It's the treasurer.
It's the treasurer.
Yeah, so,
Keep him waiting.
I guess then what, our thought that you might need money for planning and design for forensic, at least for this year, the plan that's
We have
necessary
planning money
is,
that we can drop.
your base, funding, okay.
To the capital bill.
All right.
But like I mean, it's hard for us to give an estimate, as I was saying before, on design and construction until we A, understand the requirements, and B, we've looked at some options.
Yeah, sure.
And then each of those options will come with a price tag.
Well, obviously, the first, option of using a wing on the psychiatric hospital, forced us to move to option B, yet to be developed.
We will, my understanding working with DMH and Dale is we're still gonna look at it, at BCPH, understanding that there are some constraints there.
Whatever.
But we'll look at a number of different options.
I guess at this point, what we're saying is this is a need that we have postponed and postponed. And, we are saying we need to move forward. And however that needs to be, whether, we had to put planning and design into the capital bill, which I talked to Senator Ingalls about. Or whether you can get at least the first phase with what you have, that's great news, and, you'll take it from there. When I talked to Representative Emmons, she was of the impression the 9-bed at the psychiatric hospital was.
Yeah, I talked with her also.
Yeah, so, but maybe it can be constructed in such a way.
The challenge there is going to be egress in and out of the building, as well as a rec yard, and also bringing in, patients. And so that is where the challenge lies. It's not to say that we can't overcome it. You just may have to pay quite a bit of money to do it, but that's why we have to look at it, do a cost estimate for you.
Well, even that, you'll have to, is that more cost effective than
Sure, the other options.
other options? All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, treasurer, how are you today?
Hi, Chair Kitchell. How are you? Good. Hi, everybody.
Michael,
All right, we're now moving on to the treasurer's office. Obviously, you've provided us quite a package of information, which we're not gonna be able to go through page by page or line by line. I'm sure the House will have done that for us. So, we'll move on to the treasurer, and we have the treasurer who is meeting remotely, but I see you've sent over some staff to make sure that your testimony is accurate or needs to be expanded or explained. So I'm gonna let you take it from here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Chair Kitchell. I do see Tim Duggan, who's our Director of Retirement, in the room with you, and Jeremiah Breer, who's our CFO, who's also in the room with you as well. So two folks that could certainly help with any detailed questions that anybody might have. But yeah, as you can see, we sent over our normal budget package. We have our ups and downs, which are the first few pages there in the budget materials. And probably like a lot of other agencies that are coming through your committee, our primary drivers of our ups are things like payroll and benefits and taxes and shared services and the like. If there are any specific questions that you have about any of those, we're happy to answer them.
I do have a question, sort of stepping back to the BAA, and you had recommended, I think, Ashland might have been the lead contact on it. And it had to do with the Medicaid recoveries, and you wanted to have an exemption. We pulled it out of the BAA, and because we were looking at some related issues. So not that you have to answer it today, but the House has passed out the budget. I just wanted to follow up on that. Is the language you need in there? Is it acceptable to the folks at Viva relative to the Medicaid requirements? And I just don't want it to get lost, that's all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
We
that.
didn't take it up in the BAA for a variety of reasons, but knew that the budget would be the better vehicle. So I don't, I know that there's language in the budget. I went through that, but I just wanted to have confirmation from you. And it doesn't have to be right now, but it's something I just don't want to forget.
Yeah, no, thank you, Senator Kitchell. We'll make a note of that because you're right that it was pulled from the BAA. There's language relating to our ABLE program, and individuals with disabilities can invest in that ABLE program, and oftentimes, that program's been around now for 5 or 8 years. So unfortunately, we have seen people that have invested and have passed away, and now this question of what happens with their account balance has come up, and oftentimes it's a relatively small account balance, and we were in agreement with everybody, sort of on the AHS side and elsewhere, that this was the right approach. And I will confirm, though, that everyone is still in that sort of unified agreement, and that the language is what we need.
Now, on your ups and downs, I'm looking at first sheet. I'm sure we had it last year before requests for the volunteer income tax assistance, and I see that the grant has been, it looks like it's been removed. Is that true? And are we
I think it's just been moved to a different
place?
section. Yeah, actually, if you look just a couple lines up, it's there. So I think that that had sort of been added in before, and now it's sort of like
moved
part of
from
the.
grants to your base?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so that's why we haven't heard anything this year about the request for funding, is because you've got it. All right, thank you, just.
Yeah, that's right, Senator Kitchell. And
All
I think I believe it moved to, because it moved to our base, and it was sort of directed toward the ITA, that we moved it from the grants category to sort of general appropriation category in our budget.
Okay, that answers that. Just moved from one line. If I'd looked up, I would have seen it. Okay. No, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Oh, no, please feel free to.
Well, obviously, I'm. All right, we'll keep going. I'll let you get back.
From the
Maybe appropriation to unclaimed property,
the appropriation unclaimed properties. So, if you just look broadly at our funding sources for our budget, we do have general fund, we do have special fund, and then we have other. And the special fund is generally monies out of our retirement systems that we can get into, but that's how Tim's team is paid, and potentially our treasury operations team or anybody that assists Tim's team. We keep track of our time, and anything that's relating to our pension systems, we bill back to our pension systems. Our unclaimed property.
Having a very good year in terms of what is happening with the market. It seems like that must have helped our portfolio.
Yeah, at the end of last fiscal year, there was a strong finish, and it's strong right now too. So that's certainly going to be helpful. Yeah.
So at this point, the 7%, which I know you would recommend not be changed, or the whatever group recommended not.
Yeah, the BPIC.
It seems like that's still very solid.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And a calculation of the ADAC is the return on investment, and it's pegged at 7%.
Yeah, and that was something that did come up just recently in BPIC in terms of a review, and they had a recommendation from an actuary. We reviewed it as part of our process, and everybody found it to be reasonable. And even just 18 months ago, maybe a year ago, there was a lot of concern around whether that was reasonable anymore, given the long term, not just the short term, like how the market's doing this year, but the long term trend. And it seems like that is, a pretty fair and reasonable place to be right now at 7%.
Yeah, I remember that discussion.
And it's and as you know, it's a big driver of our unfunded liability. If we don't get that number right, then it could drive the unfunded liability if it's not a reasonable number. So we are feeling confident about it now, and so is VPIC, and the markets are performing well.
And then the other related was starting the pre-fund for retiree healthcare. And we had some discussion around how we would treat, now that we were actually making payments, and we created a separate fund. Is that what, could you just sort of refresh us on how we dealt with that pre-funding? And I think we were we were gonna use the same, investment and management of the, assets, to get the best economy of scale, but, maybe
Yeah.
it's a lot to remember here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
For all the state government, Mike.
So, that pre-funding of OPEB, that helped reduce the teacher and state liabilities, the unfunded liabilities, sort
Yeah,
of
pushing $2
by over $1
billion.
billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the assets are growing in the OPEB fund. The OPEB fund is still invested by the treasurer's office. VPIC is investing the pension funds. The OPEB is still in the treasurer's office, where we are investing those funds in a way that is consistent with how VPIC is investing the pension funds. And we have our own financial advisor that assists us with that. And Jeremiah is sort of the point person on that regard. But the assets are growing in the OPEB funds, both from state contributions into the fund, but also from market gains as well. And I believe Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think between the two funds combined, it's something like close to $20 million we've earned in investment returns. And, since we started to pre-fund OPEB and made longer term investments more consistent with VPIC. So both in terms of contributions, and you can see a contribution in our budget that goes to, the pre-funding for teachers. But both in terms of the pre-funding and now the investment returns, that's starting to get going. It's really early, where our pensions are close to 60% now for teachers in terms of a funding ratio, and our state employee is getting closer to 70% in terms of a funding ratio. The OPEB is still in like that 5 to 10% funded ratio, if I remember that correctly, Tim. So they're just getting going in terms of building up assets that are necessary. But it's a hugely important thing that the legislature did and that you're continuing to follow through on.
Well, I expect you're going to be in state government much longer than I would be. So there are many lessons that cannot be forgotten as it related to funding decisions. And sometimes short-term expediencies come with a very long, in the long term, a very heavy price. And putting in a benefit and not pre-funding it and just pay go is so costly because you get none of the compounding that you just talked about that we've experienced so early on. I just, memories are short in this building, and some things seem so easy or just sort of like, well, we'll just not worry about it this year, and that's why I guess we got a little crazed relative to doing the debt service and actually doing a transfer rather than appropriation, which in that case is very modest, but it could be. It's something you don't want to continue as a practice because you're actually eroding reserves. So I just am just saying, please don't forget the lessons that some of us have learned the very hard way.
Yeah, no doubt. I think those are etched into anyone that worked on that pension task force, certainly, and anyone that was around state government during those years.
I was not on the task force, remember?
No, you're an advisory member to the task force.
Yeah, right.
You didn't even make it on.
I was on the task force, but I was assigned because all of a sudden the task force said we can't deal with this without really understanding the money and how we would finance it. At which point I became a task force of one. And got to put together, and with joint fiscal and other folk. And, I think we should really be proud of what we've done. Obviously, the cost here, you see it in the budget because we're having to make up the underfunding and we're having to do pay go at the same time we're doing, the pre-funding. But if you're around in 2038, we're gonna have good times. That's all I can say. So,
yes, 2038.
2038, Dick, how old will we be?
Mike couldn't make it.
Well, Mike can make it, but
Andy might.
Andy might.
Right.
Hannah, my money's on Hannah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
We'll all be here.
Well, that's good news though, in terms of,
Yeah,
you know,
some will
where
be
we are.
on the ground, some will be upon.
And it's-
And then the other, which we changed the language in that, to, if you could set it up earlier, getting rid of that statutory, date, regarding the, new retirement, I don't know, I forgot, what's that called?
Sure, or the,
As
an acronym.
You know, where
Say-
individuals can, it's sort of like creating like.
Oh, our
the,
program.
Retirement,
Retirement, yeah.
Yeah, Vermont Saves, Vermont Saves.
John saves, right?
Yeah, no, so we appreciate the legislature putting that language through in the BAA. If you remember, we passed Vermont Saves and you gave us a $750,000 appropriation last year. And what we were sort of hoping for when the bill passed last year is that we'd be able to enter into a partnership with another state and that we'd be able to use the other state's vendor and that would help us set up the program. And that all materialized very quickly. Delaware and Maine have entered into a partnership with Colorado. We are going to be announcing very shortly our decision to enter into a partnership with another state that is going to help us set it up even more quickly than we anticipated. So we asked for language that would help us not only move the date up in terms of when we launched the program, but also instead of having multiple tiers where certain business sizes sort of launched on different days, our vendor that we will have in the near future said that they can do it all on one day, which the chambers of commerce thought that was sort of a request from them that would make it easier for businesses to understand what the responsibilities were. So we hope to have it launched by the end of the year. And that really is almost a full year earlier than the full launch would have been when it was passed just last session. So we're feeling very good about that progress of Vermont Saves. We'll have more to announce on the partnership probably just in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, great. Yes, Senator Persson.
I have a question about unclaimed property.
Yes.
Can I do that?
Yes, you may.
So on your dashboard for that one, you have the claimants paid and the amount of money that was paid to the claimants and the amount of money that was turned over to you, but not how much was turned over to the state. Because there's always, every year, right, there's some money that kind of expires and gets turned over to the state. What is that dollar number?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So basically that, if you look on that sheet, that 14.7, that's sort of the total money that came into the state of Vermont. And then that's into the state of Vermont, like into our hands, like, you know, businesses and individuals that turned over unclaimed property. And then it sort of goes through a waterfall where we pay ourselves in our budget. That's sort of where our unclaimed property team gets funded from, is that unclaimed property money. We look at the claims that we've paid out in that particular year. And then there's also a couple of mandatory transfers depending on the situation, but we send some money into the Vermont Higher Education Trust Fund. And basically once all of that
That's on estates that exceed 10 million.
I think it's amounts under $100 that are more than 10 years old or in that ballpark. So it's sort of older claims.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of another, payment into that fund. And that is if you get, which doesn't happen that often, but if you get an estate.
Yes. Yeah.
When the tax is more than 10 million, then, the excess goes into I don't know how, the last time that happened. I think there was maybe $11 million you're shaking your head, this is past history, but, so that's what I was thinking of, is that other revenue source into that fund.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
A long time ago, because Peter Shellman was proposing to take money out of that fund for the purposes of constructing a CCB building in Brattleboro. And I said, no way. Are we going into that higher ed fund for that purpose, even though it was higher ed? So we actually, we had a bond premium that we used to fund the building, so we didn't, but that's a long time ago.
Well, it's a nice building that got built out.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
But
It's your hometown.
But to Senator Perchlik's question, so basically
14.7 million, is that how much money was like expired, so the holders no longer, when it says turnover by holders, that means that it's
so a holder,
You have to hold it though.
holder is the business, sort of a technical term, just for a business that's holding your property. So those businesses turned over the property they were holding for Vermonters to our office. So that's sort of the top number. The number that goes from us to the general fund in terms of the annual general fund transfer is that difference between our cost to operate ourselves, our claims that we paid out, and then that holder amount of 14.7. So last year we turned over to the general fund like somewhere between 10 and 10.5 million, which is the sort of the amount that was cleared based on the amounts that we have reserved in unclaimed property to pay claims, based on the amount that came in that particular year, and then based on all the expenses that went out. We had about 10 to 10.5 million of monies that we could send to the general fund.
Because you have to hold it for a certain amount of time before you can free it up. I see.
Yeah, so there's sort of two different things that happen. There's sort of an accounting piece to it, and then there's sort of the finance piece of it. So from an accounting perspective, like, you never lose your claim, you never lose your ability to claim a piece of property. So even if it's 30 years old, 40 years old, even if you're not the holder, but you're the descendant, and it's sort of, so you always have the ability to claim. But what happens practically is that as claims get older, it just becomes so much more challenging to find out who it is. And a lot of our claims are for very small amounts of money, like $5, $10, $15. So all of that adds up to a situation where we have, tens of millions of dollars that would just be sitting there otherwise. And, decades ago, there was the determination made that excess amount every year that we determine, we don't need in the immediate term to pay claims will go to a general fund transfer. And that number has grown and grown and grown over the last decade. So just to
actually have two parts, one of which is what we're assuming and building the budget. And then very close to the end of the year, Beth used to call us and say, we can increase that amount. And because the Senate is the last to act, we're very that that offer. So
that's right. And
Thank you.
so you're going to experience in two ways, hopefully, but at least one in terms of what is assumed in the base.
yeah, and just to bring home Senator Kitchell's point, I think that last year, it started off as a $2.5 million base, and then it ended up being over 10 million. So, the trend, as I said, has been upward, but a lot of those numbers don't come in until late in May. And even after the budget's been finalized in terms of claims and whatnot.
Other questions we've got? Okay. Anything that we haven't asked you that you don't want us to ask you?
Well, I'll just on unclaimed property, I'll mention a couple of things that we're up to there. We've initiated a couple of different pilot projects to try to more affirmatively return money to individuals. We partnered with the tax department to do a pilot project where we identified about 350 Vermonters who had claims between $200 and $220. And we verified for folks that had Social Security numbers, we verified through the tax department that they had been a recent tax filer in Vermont through their Social Security number. We verified their most recent mailing address. We sent them a letter saying they're part of the pilot project. I think it was 346 of the 350 actually landed with somebody. We did it certified mail, and then we sent checks afterward. So that we viewed as a very successful pilot, and we're trying to think about how to scale it up into the future. And then with the Secretary of State's office, we did a similar pilot for nonprofits where we had about 250 nonprofits that received about $150,000 from our office that we were able to verify through Sarah's department that they were active and that they had a recent mailing address that would be a good address to reach them. So we even, during that pilot project, we turned up a foundation that had $23,000 that they had forgotten about. It was a family that had a foundation for their son who tragically passed away from cancer before the pandemic. And they had another child that had, significant needs and wanted to protect that child during COVID. And they really got wrapped up into that during the COVID pandemic. And when that subsided, they just had forgotten that this $23,000 was in PayPal, and they run a foundation that provides young people that have cancer an opportunity to have some wish fulfilled, because Make-A-Wish actually ends at a certain age, and there are a lot of young people that have cancer nowadays in their early 20s, and that's how old their son was when he passed away from cancer. So it was a really nice story to be able to return money to a really good cause that the parents had just completely forgotten that it existed. So that's just kind of an example of how impactful that can be. And then we've also been doing more advertising for unclaimed property. We partnered with Tom Messner to do our new TV ad with him, which aired during January and February, which we got good claim volume from. And then for the first time, we've been advertising on Facebook and through Front Porch Forum. So those mediums have been pretty good for us. We've been getting a lot of traction in ways that we haven't before. So we've seen the number of claims, maybe not the total volume in terms of the total number, but the number of individual people that are filing a claim has been going up. So all of that seems to be favorable.
Other questions? Anything that you'd like to add in terms of him or?
I think the treasurer covered it.
Okay,
Yeah, question.
right. Well, we appreciate your work, and I think if you'll just check to make sure what's ended up in the House budget, and if you want to make any changes or something is missing, just let us know, and we'll
Yes.
see what we can do
Yes.
on this end as well.
You know, Senator Kitchell, if I could have one more minute, I just realized something that will be in the House budget that was not in the governor's recommend, which was a request for an audit position in our department. And the audit position would largely be funded by unclaimed property, so it doesn't have a general fund impact. And I don't know if the House decided for it to have no general fund impact or just a limited general fund impact. But either way, we're talking about 20 or 25,000.
You did have a general fund impact in that. That
It'll
would be less
reduce
money
the,
that
yeah,
would go to the general fund
yeah.
in that way.
Mhm.
It could, but that number's also been going up, steadily.
A lot
And
depends on how much above the base.
How would the auditor be,
yeah,
in
So
the office?
so the goal here is that we haven't had sort of a enterprise risk position for a few years, and the opportunity for fraud has continued to rise, both in unclaimed property, where we've had a number of sophisticated entities try to, steal money from our unclaimed property division. You also worry about payments that might be made by our Treasury operations team, that could be invoice fraud and things of that nature. Even retirement has seen instances where people have potentially tried to get fraudulent retirement payments
Yeah,
and
it
the
didn't
like.
work for me, Mike. I don't understand.
So, so there are those instances, and then there's also internal controls, right? We handle a ton of money through
You
our,
do. Mhm.
and
Yeah.
we want to make sure internally we have really strong controls, but then also externally we want to have someone that can investigate.
So was this a position you used to have? You made some reference, we used to do this. Is this a position you had in the past and moved, or never was
So-
there? Somebody did it in their spare time? I was just wondering your
Yeah,
comment. We
it was
used to do it.
from my understanding, somebody had, basically we started a committee that would be led by someone that sort of did it in their spare time, and that person's left the office. And I think it's really the kind of thing that is important enough to have a person in charge of it within our department.
All right, well, we've got our Christmas list, so we'll make sure. And we'll double check what the House did. Send first one.
But a question on the debt service
Yes.
one, you mentioned that the projected debt issuance is gonna go down from 24 to 31. Like what magnitude are we looking? How much are we expecting to go down?
So if we go to the ups and downs, we might be able to get the specific number.
On debt service?
Yeah,
Nation.
debt service has generally been trending down the last number of years, and
Well, because we haven't been bonding very much.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't been bonding very much, and the bonds that when we do bond, the bonds that we're retiring are smaller than the bonds that we've been issuing. So, I think it's probably the magnitude is probably in the low millions in terms of the decrease, if my memory serves me correctly. So that in terms of the actual impact, so that means the bonds that we're retiring are more in the tens of millions of dollars year over year. But we can get you a specific breakdown of what that looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And is the higher interest rates affecting the savings there?
Yeah, so the higher interest rates combined, it's been sort of multiple things that have been happening. There's sort of the challenge of getting a project up and running because of workforce challenges and supply chain challenges and all of the like, plus the state's in really good liquidity position in terms of our cash on hand, and then also the higher interest rates. So we have sort of been navigating that to the greatest degree that we can by just paying with cash until we need to bond. We did a bond issuance last September, and we're likely to do another one this June. So that one in last September was the first one in 2 years, I believe. So that's unusual in terms of the amount of time that we've been not in the market. But there's still opportunity to refinance. We found some opportunity last year to refinance some of our older bonds, and I think that saved about $1 million over a 20-year period of interest rates. So even in the high interest rate environment, a municipal bond we're still paying it's still like 5.5%. So because it's tax exempt, it's much lower than.
Vermonters love those general obligation bonds for that reason.
Yeah, they sell out very quickly.
Yeah, they do. But your ups and downs shows very clearly the general fund is being taken out. It shows that it reflects that transfer versus the appropriation, which I think was section 1100 in our budget for many years. So
yeah, so that shows that transfer versus the appropriation. The money that's still in there, the 600,000, is money that we need to effectuate the bond issuance. So that's money that does need to be appropriated. Things to pay our underwriters and our lawyers and the like. That can't be a transfer.
No, I see that.
That's all the bond counsel, that's a vendor that we use, I see.
Yes.
Other questions? If not,
Other question for Senator personally,
Oh, okay.
but not.
all right. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we can, we will take our break and the auditor will be on at 3. No,
Thank you very much.
Or the vet's home. So thank you very much, Mike. And if there's anything, just let us know in terms of after you've had a chance to look at what the House has got in their budget, anything that you make sure that you mentioned the position, you want to make sure on the Medicaid recovery, but anything else, let us know.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
So we'll go up live and we will come back at 3, when we'll hear from the auditor, and then we'll move to